Hey guys, welcome back. Tonight, you're not listening to a story about kings, crowns, or loud revolutions. Tonight, you're stepping quietly into something far more subtle. The true story of the richest family in history, the Rothschilds. A family that didn't conquer the world with armies or empires, but with patience, trust, handwritten letters, and decisions made in silent rooms while the rest of Europe slept. We'll begin in a forgotten Jewish alley in Frankfurt, where money was counted by candlelight, and follow the slow, unseen rise of a family whose influence flowed beneath history like an underground river, shaping wars, banks, and nations without ever needing to announce itself. This is not a story of conspiracy or spectacle. It's a calm, human journey through modern banking history whispered gently, the way history sounds when it's finally allowed to rest. So before you get comfortable, take a gentle moment to like this video and subscribe, but only if these deep sleep history stories help you find peace, sleep better, or simply reflect on our shared journey through time. Now close your eyes, let your breathing slow, and allow yourself to drift into a true history for sleep, where wealth grows quietly, power remains unseen, and the world changes without raising its voice. As the years passed inside the Judengasse, the narrowness of the alley did not change, but Mayor Amschel Rothschild's world slowly expanded beyond it, not in distance, but in reach. Trust has a quiet way of moving where people cannot. It travels folded inside letters, sealed in promises, carried in reputations whispered from one household to another. In late 18th century Europe, trust was rarer than gold, especially when it came from a man born behind locked gates. And yet, it was precisely this scarcity that gave it weight. Mayer understood that if he could become reliable in a world accustomed to disappointment, his value would extend far beyond his physical confinement. Collectors of rare coins and antiquities among the German nobility were always searching for knowledgeable intermediaries. They needed people who could authenticate, source, and preserve objects tied to history and prestige. Mayer's meticulous habits, sharpened by years of careful survival, fit this need perfectly. He learned not only the metal and minting of coins, but their stories, which ruler issued them, which war drained them from circulation, which dynasty fell as their currency remained. These details mattered deeply to aristocrats who saw themselves as custodians of continuity. Mayer became quietly a bridge between memory and wealth. His work required patience that bordered on ritual. Letters were written carefully, transactions recorded twice, names remembered with precision. When mistakes happened, as they always do, they were corrected transparently. Over time, this consistency created something rare: confidence. A noble client who trusted Mayer once was likely to trust him again, and each repeated exchange loosened the invisible boundary between the ghetto and the city beyond it. The Judengasse remained locked at night, but during the day, trust moved freely in and out, unnoticed by guards. One of the most important shifts in Mayer's life was his relationship with the House of Hesse, particularly Crown Prince Wilhelm, who would later become one of Europe's wealthiest rulers. This connection did not begin with grand negotiations or dramatic meetings. It began with coins, rare, well-preserved coins that Mayer sourced and explained with quiet authority. Wilhelm valued discretion, and Mayer offered it naturally. Their exchanges were calm, almost understated. Yet beneath this calm, something transformative was happening.
Mayer was being tested repeatedly, and each time he passed, not by ambition, but by reliability. Money in this period was deeply personal. Banking was not yet an institutional system we recognize today. It was relational, built on individuals rather than corporations. To be trusted with funds was to be trusted with a part of someone's identity and future. Mayer approached this responsibility with humility shaped by scarcity. He had seen how quickly security could vanish, so he moved slowly, conservatively, ensuring that growth never outpaced control. This restraint would become one of the defining characteristics of the Rothschild approach to finance. Inside his modest home, the atmosphere remained unchanged. There were no displays of success. The wooden table stayed worn, the shelves stayed practical. Wealth, when it began to accumulate, did so quietly, almost invisibly. This was intentional. Visibility invited risk. Silence preserved longevity. Mayer taught his children not through lectures but through example, by showing them how discipline outlasts opportunity, how networks grow stronger when nourished patiently, and how power does not need to announce itself to be effective. What emerged during this period was not merely a successful merchant, but a philosophy. Wealth was not something to be seized, but something to be cultivated. Trust was not demanded, but earned repeatedly, and growth was not measured by speed, but by stability. These principles were forged in the constraints of the Judengasse, where excess could be dangerous and attention unwelcome. Yet they would later allow the Rothschild family to operate seamlessly across borders, languages, and political systems. As you picture this phase of the story, imagine the quiet rhythm of correspondence traveling between Frankfurt and noble estates. Wax seals cooling on envelopes, coins wrapped carefully in cloth, conversations held in low voices, more about continuity than conquest. Mayer Amschel Rothschild was not building an empire in the way history often portrays such figures. He was building a system of trust, one relationship at a time, steady enough to outlast turbulence. And as night falls again over the Judengasse, that trust continues its journey outward, even while its origin remains still, breathing patiently in the dark.
By the time Mayer Amschel Rothschild reached the later years of his life, something subtle but irreversible had taken shape. It was not a fortune in the modern sense, not yet an empire, and certainly not a name spoken loudly in public squares. What existed instead was far more durable, a way of thinking that treated family as infrastructure, time as an ally, and patience as a form of quiet power. Inside the Judengasse, where walls still stood and gates still closed each night, a financial philosophy had been forged that one day would move freely across all of Europe. Mayer did not see his work as his alone. This distinction mattered deeply. Many successful merchants before him had risen quickly, only to disappear just as fast when circumstances changed. Mayer observed these patterns carefully. He noticed that isolated success was fragile, but shared discipline could endure. And so, within the modest rooms of his home, he began shaping not only a business, but a family system. His sons were not taught to compete with one another, but to coordinate, not to seek individual prominence, but collective stability. In a world that rewarded loud ambition, the Rothschild household cultivated quiet alignment. Conversations at the table were practical, almost understated. Decisions were discussed calmly, risks weighed slowly. There was an emphasis on consistency rather than brilliance, on repeatable actions rather than singular victories. Mayer encouraged his children to learn languages, understand customs beyond Frankfurt, and respect the invisible rules that governed different societies. Money, he taught them, flowed not just through markets, but through trust networks shaped by culture and memory.
To navigate those networks, one needed humility as much as intelligence. This was a radical approach for its time. Most families concentrated wealth in one place, one city, one lineage. Mayer envisioned something different. He imagined a family that could exist in multiple locations at once, connected by shared principles rather than proximity. Though the Judengasse had taught him confinement, it had also taught him coordination. The same discipline required to survive in tight quarters could be scaled across borders. Each son, he believed, could become a node in a wider system, independent in daily operations, but unified in purpose. Importantly, Mayer insisted on discretion. Wealth that announced itself invited scrutiny, envy, and political danger. Wealth that moved quietly could adapt. This belief shaped how the family handled both success and setbacks. Profits were reinvested thoughtfully. Losses were absorbed collectively rather than assigned blame. Reputation was protected above all else because Mayer understood that in finance, memory lasts longer than money. A broken trust could echo for decades. A preserved trust could compound across generations. As the century turned and Europe edged toward profound upheaval, these principles became increasingly valuable. Political borders shifted, alliances changed, wars disrupted traditional flows of capital. But systems built on flexibility and internal trust proved resilient. The Rothschild family, though still rooted in the lessons of the Judengasse, was no longer confined by it. They were prepared, not through prediction, but through structure. To understand the significance of this moment, imagine the contrast. A family once restricted to a narrow alley, now thinking in terms of decades and continents, not because they had escaped their origins, but because they had fully absorbed them. Scarcity taught them caution, exclusion taught them cooperation, silence taught them observation. These were not traits celebrated in heroic histories, but they were precisely the traits that endure when noise fades. As night settles once more over Frankfurt and the gates of the Judengasse close with their familiar finality, the story of the Rothschilds remains unremarkable to the outside world. There are no banners, no announcements, only a household breathing steadily in the dark, aligned by shared purpose, prepared for a future none of them can fully see. This is the end of the beginning, not the rise of the richest family in history, but the moment they learned how to last. Let your thoughts slow here. Let the quiet carry you forward as the story prepares to move beyond the alley, beyond the walls, and into the wider world.
There are people who grow rich because fortune smiles on them at the right moment, and then there are people who grow rich because they watch quietly while everyone else rushes past. Mayer Amschel Rothschild belonged firmly to the second kind. He was not known for speeches or bold declarations. He was known for silence, for ledgers filled with careful handwriting, and for an ability to notice patterns others dismissed as insignificant. Long before the word banker carried prestige, Mayer was already practicing a form of banking rooted not in power, but in patience. In late 18th century Europe, money did not flow smoothly through institutions. Coins differed from region to region, values shifted with wars, and trust was fragile. For the aristocracy, managing wealth was as much about discretion as it was about growth. Mayer's early work as a dealer in coins and antiquities placed him directly inside this delicate ecosystem. To an outsider, his shop may have appeared modest, almost unremarkable, but for those who understood value, it was a place of precision. Each coin passed through his hands was weighed, inspected, and contextualized. Its origin mattered, its journey mattered, and most importantly, its future mattered. What set Mayer apart was not simply knowledge, but restraint. He did not speculate wildly. He did not promise impossible returns. Instead, he focused on accuracy. If a coin was flawed, he said so.
If a deal carried risk, he documented it. Over time, this honesty became his signature. Aristocrats who had grown weary of flattery found comfort in his understatement. In a world of exaggeration, his caution felt grounding. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, this reputation opened doors. At night, when the city quieted and the Judengasse gates closed, Mayer's work continued by candlelight. The scene was simple but deliberate. Coins laid out in small groups, ledgers opened to clean pages, figures recorded carefully, checked twice, then left to rest. These were not mere records, they were reflections of behavior. Over years of observation, Mayer began to notice recurring rhythms: who borrowed frequently and who repaid promptly, how seasons, politics, and social events affected liquidity. Patterns emerged not from theory, but from attention. This attentiveness led Mayer to a subtle realization: money behaved less like a static object and more like a living system. It moved in predictable ways when trust was present and erratically when fear dominated. Those who needed money urgently often paid more for discretion than for speed. Those who planned patiently gained leverage without appearing forceful. Mayer did not announce these insights. He allowed them to shape his decisions quietly, adjusting terms, timing, and expectations with remarkable consistency. Gradually, his role evolved. He was no longer merely exchanging coins, he was holding them. Safekeeping at first was informal, a trusted favor extended to select clients, but it marked a turning point. To be entrusted with another person's wealth was to be invited into their private calculations, their anxieties, their hopes. Mayer treated this responsibility with profound seriousness. Funds were separated, documented, and returned exactly as agreed. No shortcuts, no improvisation. Each successful transaction reinforced the same message: this was a man who could be relied upon to remember what others forgot. The aristocracy noticed, not loudly, but steadily. Recommendations passed quietly from one household to another. Mayer became, in effect, a silent custodian of wealth. He did not control fortunes, but he protected them. And in doing so, he positioned himself at the threshold of something new. Banking, as it would later be understood, was beginning to take shape, not in grand halls, but in the dim glow of a candle over a well-kept ledger. As you listen, imagine the sound of pages turning softly, the faint clink of metal, the steady breathing of a man absorbed in concentration. Mayer Amschel Rothschild did not rush history. He allowed it to reveal itself one pattern at a time. This is the quiet origin of Rothschild's wealth, not a secret hoarded, but a discipline practiced nightly, patiently, as the world outside fell asleep.
As Mayer Amschel Rothschild spent more nights bent over his ledgers, a quiet transformation took place, not in the size of his business, but in the depth of his understanding. The coins he handled were no longer just objects of value. They became signals. Each entry in his books carried more than numbers. It carried intent, fear, urgency, patience. Over time, Mayer realized that when people entrusted him with their money, they also revealed something else: how they thought about the future. Some clients borrowed cautiously, even when they could afford more. Others borrowed recklessly, confident that their status would protect them from consequence. Some repaid early, eager to preserve reputation. Others delayed, assuming silence would be forgiven. These behaviors repeated themselves with remarkable consistency. Mayer did not judge them, he simply recorded them. And in doing so, he began to see money as a language, one that spoke clearly if listened to long enough. One pattern emerged slowly but decisively. Those who valued discretion over speed were almost always the most stable.
They preferred quiet arrangements, flexible timelines, and precise documentation. These were the clients who weathered As Mayor Amschel Rothschild spent more nights bent over his ledgers, a quiet transformation took place, not in the size of his business, but in the depth of his understanding. The coins he handled were no longer just objects of value. They became signals. Each entry in his books carried more than numbers. It carried intent, fear, urgency, patience. Over time, Mayer realized that when people entrusted him with their money, they also revealed something else: how they thought about the future. Some clients borrowed cautiously, even when they could afford more. Others borrowed recklessly, confident that their status would protect them from consequence. Some repaid early, eager to preserve reputation. Others delayed, assuming silence would be forgiven. These behaviors repeated themselves with remarkable consistency. Mayer did not judge them, he simply recorded them. And in doing so, he began to see money as a language, one that spoke clearly if listened to long enough. One pattern emerged slowly but decisively. Those who valued discretion over speed were almost always the most stable. They preferred quiet arrangements, flexible timelines, and precise documentation. These were the clients who weathered political change with minimal disruption. In contrast, those who demanded urgency often carried hidden pressures, debts, ambitions, or vulnerabilities they did not disclose. Mayer adjusted his terms accordingly, not to exploit, but to protect both parties. This balance between caution and opportunity became central to his method. Unlike many merchants of his era, Mayer did not chase growth for its own sake. He understood that expansion without understanding created fragility. So he allowed his role to deepen before it widened. When aristocrats began leaving larger sums with him for safekeeping or redistribution, he responded not with excitement, but with structure. Separate records, clear conditions, no mingling of funds. These practices, simple as they may seem now, were quietly revolutionary at the time. They reduced risk, increased transparency, and reinforced trust, the true currency of early banking. Gradually, Mayer's clients stopped seeing him merely as a dealer. He became a reference point. When uncertainty arose, a shifting alliance, a rumored conflict, a question of inheritance, they asked for his counsel, not because he wielded authority, but because he listened carefully and spoke sparingly. His advice was rarely dramatic. Often it consisted of reminders to move slowly, to preserve liquidity, to avoid unnecessary attention. These suggestions, grounded in observation rather than speculation, proved invaluable. One of the most significant moments in this evolution was when Mayer began managing not just transactions, but timing. He recognized that when money moved could matter more than how much moved. Holding funds briefly during unstable periods, releasing them when conditions settled, allowed clients to avoid losses without ever appearing defensive. This subtle mastery of timing further distinguished him. It required patience, discipline, and the confidence to remain inactive when others panicked. Through all of this, Mayer remained outwardly unchanged. His manner stayed modest. His workspace stayed simple. There were no signs of transformation visible to passers-by. But within his ledgers, a new role was taking shape. He had become an interpreter of financial behavior, someone who understood not only money, but the people behind it. This understanding allowed him to serve as a stabilizing force in an increasingly volatile Europe. As you imagine these quiet nights, picture Mayer pausing before closing his book, reviewing the day's entries once more, not to calculate profit, but to observe rhythm. Which names appeared repeatedly, which amounts fluctuated, which patterns persisted. In these moments of reflection, the foundations of European banking history were being laid, not through grand innovation, but through sustained attention. Let the pace of the story slow here, as Mayer's own work did, settling into a calm awareness that would soon draw him even closer to the inner circles of power.
There comes a moment in certain lives when trust quietly crosses a threshold and becomes something else entirely. For Mayer Amschel Rothschild, that moment did not arrive with a ceremony or public recognition. It arrived in silence, when influential figures stopped asking him to exchange money and began asking him to keep it. Not briefly, not casually, but with an expectation of continuity. To hold another person's wealth over time was to hold their unspoken confidence, and Mayer understood the gravity of that invitation. By now, his reputation had settled into a steady rhythm across aristocratic circles. He was known not for daring strategies, but for steadiness, not for speed, but for memory. When funds were placed with him, they did not vanish into speculation. They rested, documented, protected. Mayer approached these arrangements with a ritual-like discipline. Terms were clear, boundaries were respected, silence was preserved. In a period where political winds could shift abruptly, this calm reliability was invaluable. One of the reasons noble families felt safe in trusting him with their resources was his refusal to blur roles. He did not pretend to be a courtier. He did not seek influence beyond his function. He positioned himself as a custodian, not a controller. This distinction mattered. It allowed powerful clients to engage with him without fear of exposure or leverage. Their wealth was not used to elevate his public standing. It was shielded by his discretion, and in return, his standing deepened quietly where it mattered most. As his responsibilities grew, so did the subtle complexity of his work. He coordinated transfers between locations, managed temporary holdings during unstable periods, and ensured that funds could be accessed smoothly when needed. Each operation was executed with the same careful tempo that had defined his early days. There were no dramatic innovations, only consistent refinements. Over time, these refinements accumulated into something larger than any single transaction, a private system of trust-based finance operating beneath the surface of European society. What distinguished Mayer during this phase was his ability to remain unchanged by proximity to power. He interacted with princes and nobles, yet his manner did not shift. He listened more than he spoke. He asked clarifying questions. He avoided making promises that depended on favorable outcomes rather than controlled processes. This restraint reassured his clients that their interests would not be sacrificed to ambition. In an age where visibility often invited danger, Mayer's invisibility became his greatest asset. This role, the trusted holder of wealth, marked the true origin of Rothschild banking, not because money multiplied rapidly, but because trust did. Each successful stewardship strengthened the network surrounding him. Recommendations continued to spread, not through announcements, but through quiet assurances exchanged in private rooms. The phrase, "he can be trusted," carried more weight than any contract, and Mayer honored that phrase relentlessly. As the chapter closes, imagine the scene once more. The ledger balanced, the candle nearly burned down,
the city outside resting uneasily between stability and change. Mayer closes his book and pauses, not from exhaustion, but from reflection. He understands now that his work has crossed a line. He is no longer simply observing the flow of money, he is shaping how it moves, gently, responsibly, and invisibly. This is the culmination of patience practiced nightly, of silence respected consistently, of discipline repeated without interruption. Let this moment settle slowly. The story does not rush forward. It breathes. And in that breath, the foundations of one of history's most enduring financial families are firmly in place, ready to extend beyond one man, beyond one city, and into a future shaped by trust rather than noise.
So instead of building a single grand house and gathering all his wealth under one roof, Mayer Amschel Rothschild made a choice that seemed almost counterintuitive for his time. He chose dispersion over concentration. When the night settled over Frankfurt and the familiar quiet filled the Judengasse, Mayer began to imagine a different map of the world, not drawn with borders or armies, but with trust, distance, and time. In his mind, wealth did not need to sit still to be strong. It needed to breathe, to listen, to be present in many places at once. And so the future of the Rothschild family did not begin with a fortress, but with 5 journeys. Each of his sons would leave home, not together, not dramatically, but one by one, carrying letters, instructions, and an unspoken responsibility heavier than any chest of coins. London, Paris, Vienna, Naples, and Frankfurt itself became points of light on Mayer's internal map. As evening lamps were lit across Europe, 5 small flames would glow in different cities, connected not by roads, but by correspondence. This was not a strategy born from ambition alone. It was born from observation. Mayer had watched how political winds shifted, how wars disrupted trade, and how fortunes collapsed when they were rooted too deeply in a single place. The departures were quiet. There were no speeches, only long conversations at the table, careful explanations, and repeated reminders that each son was not acting for himself alone. He was acting as part of a whole. Letters were to be written regularly. Decisions were to be shared. Profits were not to be hoarded locally, but aligned with the family's long-term balance. Trust, Mayer emphasized, was not optional. It was the foundation. A stranger could betray you for advantage. A brother, bound by shared legacy, had reason to think in decades. As the sons settled into their new cities, they encountered different rhythms of life. London moved with maritime urgency, sensitive to news and trade. Paris carried elegance and political volatility in equal measure. Vienna balanced imperial tradition with cautious administration. Naples pulsed with regional complexity and opportunity. Each city demanded adaptation, but the principles remained constant: discretion, accuracy, patience. These shared values allowed the brothers to function as extensions of one another rather than competitors. What made this arrangement extraordinary was not simply the geographic spread, but the flow of information. In an age before telegraphs, letters were lifelines. The Rothschild brothers wrote constantly, sharing observations, warnings, and opportunities. These letters moved faster and more reliably than official channels, not because they were secret,
but because they were consistent. Over time, this internal communication created a synchronized awareness across Europe. When one city felt pressure, others adjusted. When opportunity arose in one place, resources could be redirected smoothly from another. To outsiders, the family appeared fragmented. To those who looked closer, it was a single organism, responsive and resilient. Mayer's insight was simple but profound. Unity did not require proximity, it required alignment. By distributing his sons, he reduced risk without diluting control. Each brother operated independently in daily matters, yet none acted alone in purpose. This balance between autonomy and cohesion allowed the Rothschild network to adapt to events with remarkable calm. As you imagine this chapter unfolding, picture a map of Europe at night, cities dimly lit, 5 candles glowing steadily, their light flickering but never extinguished. Each flame represents a son, attentive and patient, writing by lamplight, waiting for news, ready to respond. This is the beginning of the 5 fingers strategy, not a grasping hand, but an open one, sensing the pulse of a continent. Let the rhythm of these distant lights slow your thoughts as the story settles into a wider, quieter pattern.
As the 5 brothers settled into their distant cities, something invisible but powerful began to flow between them. It was not money at first, nor goods or contracts. It was information, carried patiently by ink on paper. In an era when news traveled at the speed of a horse or a ship, these letters became the quiet arteries of the Rothschild banking network. Each envelope held observations gathered from conversations, markets, docks, and drawing rooms. None of it was dramatic. All of it was precise. And together, these small details formed a picture of Europe that no single city could see alone. The brothers wrote to one another with remarkable discipline. They described not only prices and availability, but mood, whether merchants seemed cautious or eager, whether officials spoke confidently or hesitated, whether rumors lingered longer than usual. These subtleties mattered. They revealed what numbers alone could not. Over time, the family developed a shared sense of timing, a collective intuition shaped by repetition. Decisions were rarely rushed, they were synchronized. This internal correspondence did not exist to outmaneuver others aggressively. Its purpose was alignment. When one city sensed tightening credit, another could hold back. When opportunities surfaced quietly in one place, resources from elsewhere could be redirected without spectacle. To the outside world, these movements appeared coincidental. To the family, they were coordinated breaths. This was the genius of the system. It reduced exposure while increasing responsiveness. Trust made this possible. Each brother knew that information shared would not be exploited for individual gain. It would be used for the family's long horizon. This trust eliminated friction. There was no need for contracts between them, no elaborate safeguards. The family bond itself served as the strongest guarantee. In a financial world often dominated by suspicion, this internal clarity provided a decisive advantage. The letters themselves became objects of care. They were written clearly, read attentively, and stored methodically. Patterns emerged across months and years. Repeated phrases, consistent concerns, recurring opportunities. The brothers learned to read between the lines, to recognize when caution was being advised gently or when patience was being requested silently.
This subtle literacy deepened their coordination. Importantly, the network did not aim to predict the future. It aimed to remain adaptable. By staying informed across multiple centers, the family avoided overcommitment to any single narrative. They did not need to be first, they needed to be prepared. When disruptions came, as they inevitably did, the Rothschilds could adjust calmly while others reacted emotionally. As you imagine these exchanges, picture lamplight falling on a desk in London, then Paris, then Vienna. Pages folded carefully, seals pressed, couriers departing quietly into the night. The markets slept, unaware that a conversation was unfolding across borders, shaping flows without ever announcing itself. This was not control, it was coherence. Let this rhythm continue gently, the ticking of time measured in correspondence, the steady accumulation of shared awareness. In this quiet exchange of letters, the 5 fingers of the family learned to move as one hand, not to grasp, but to balance. And in that balance, their network grew stronger, ready for the pressures that history would soon apply.
With time, the brilliance of Mayor Amschel Rothschild's strategy became clear not through dominance, but through endurance. The 5 sons did not attempt to outshine one another, nor did they seek to centralize authority in a single voice. Instead, they learned to function as parts of a whole, responding to pressure wherever it appeared without drawing attention to the source of that response. This was the essence of the 5 fingers approach, not 5 competing ambitions, but one coordinated hand. Each brother carried the same internal compass. They knew when to advance and when to pause. When one city faced political uncertainty, another quietly absorbed responsibility. When markets tightened in one region, liquidity flowed gently from elsewhere. To outsiders, these shifts appeared organic, almost accidental, but within the family, they were understood as shared adjustments, guided by long-established principles rather than impulse. What made this system so resilient was not secrecy in the dramatic sense, but predictability among those inside it. The brothers trusted not only each other's loyalty, but each other's judgment. Years of shared upbringing, shared instruction, and shared silence had shaped a common mindset. Disagreements occurred, as they do in any family, but they unfolded privately and resolved patiently. There was no rush to win an argument. There was only a need to preserve coherence. This internal stability allowed the Rothschild network to grow without fracturing. Clients in different cities experienced consistent behavior regardless of which brother they dealt with. Terms felt familiar, responses felt measured. This consistency built confidence externally, reinforcing the family's reputation as a reliable presence in an unpredictable era. Trust, once again, compounded. Importantly, the brothers did not view distance as separation. Letters, routines, and shared expectations collapsed geography. London was not far from Paris when a letter arrived weekly. Vienna felt close when advice was echoed across cities. The family operated in what might be called a shared mental space, a network of understanding rather than proximity. This allowed them to think continentally while acting locally. As years passed, this structure proved difficult for others to imitate. Partnerships could dissolve, alliances could shift, but a family bound by generational purpose moved differently. Incentives aligned naturally. Success for one strengthened all. Loss for one was absorbed collectively. This reduced fear, encouraged patience, and discouraged reckless risk. In a financial landscape often driven by short-term gain, the Rothschilds quietly played a longer game.
As this chapter draws to a close, imagine once more the map at night. 5 cities, 5 steady lights, no single flame dominating the others. Together they form a hand resting gently over Europe, not gripping, not forcing, but sensing change as it happens. This was the true power of the strategy, not control, but presence, not speed, but readiness. Let your thoughts slow here. The movement of the hand becomes still. The letters rest on desks. The candles burn lower. The family network is complete, prepared for the storms and opportunities that the next chapters of history will bring. And as sleep approaches, the image remains simple and calm. One family, many cities, moving together in silence.
As the 19th century dawned, Europe did not wake gently. It trembled. Armies marched, borders blurred, and the name Napoleon echoed across capitals like distant thunder. Cannons reshaped landscapes, and entire economies bent under the weight of war. Yet amid this noise, there existed another rhythm, quieter, slower, and far more decisive. While soldiers moved across fields, letters moved across desks. And in those letters, the Rothschild family found their place in history. War, above all else, is expensive. Nations at war burn money as quickly as they burn gunpowder. Armies must be fed, clothed, armed, and paid long before victory can be imagined. Taxation alone could not sustain such demands, especially when trade was disrupted and populations strained. This is where war bonds entered the story. Promises written on paper, asking citizens and financiers to lend money now in exchange for repayment later with interest. These bonds were not just financial instruments, they were acts of faith in survival. Governments needed buyers, they needed trust, and they needed speed. The Rothschilds, by this point, had something rare, a network that crossed borders even as borders hardened. While official channels slowed under suspicion and bureaucracy, family correspondence moved steadily. London could speak to Paris, Vienna could hear from Frankfurt, Naples remained connected even as alliances shifted. Information, not force, became their advantage. The family did not fight battles, they financed endurance. Gold and silver were moved carefully, often indirectly through routes that avoided attention. Money flowed where armies could not. This required discretion bordering on invisibility. Couriers traveled under ordinary guises. Messages were written plainly, sometimes coded simply enough to appear unremarkable if intercepted. Nothing theatrical, just effective. The goal was not secrecy for drama's sake, but clarity within the family and obscurity to everyone else. During the Napoleonic Wars, timing mattered as much as capital. Knowing when a government would need funds, when confidence was wavering, when victory or defeat felt near, these insights shaped decisions. The Rothschild letters carried such impressions, not predictions shouted boldly, but observations noted calmly. A delayed payment here, a rushed request there. Each detail helped the family decide where to commit resources and where to wait. To the outside world, the Rothschilds appeared as bankers fulfilling requests. To those who looked closer, they were something else, stabilizers in chaos. They enabled governments to function when systems were strained to breaking. In return, they earned influence, not through titles, but through reliability. Trust compounded once more. Imagine these moments as night scenes, a city under curfew,
a desk lit by a single candle, a letter opened, read slowly, and answered with care. Outside, drums and rumors. Inside, calm handwriting. This contrast defined the Rothschild role during wartime. They did not silence the noise, they worked beneath it. As this chapter begins, let the pace slow. Let the battles remain distant like thunder beyond the horizon. Focus instead on the quiet movements of paper, ink, and intention. Because in the age of Napoleon, it was not only generals who shaped outcomes. Sometimes it was those who understood how to listen while the world shouted.
As the wars deepened, the machinery behind them grew heavier. Cannons required iron, iron required factories, factories required wages, and wages required money that governments did not yet possess. War bonds became the bridge between urgency and survival. On paper, they were simple promises. In practice, they were fragile structures dependent on belief. Investors needed reassurance that states would endure long enough to repay them, and states needed intermediaries capable of translating chaos into confidence. The Rothschild family stepped into this space quietly. They did not invent war bonds, but they understood how to make them work across fractured Europe. Their advantage lay not only in capital, but in coordination. A bond issued in one country could be supported by liquidity in another. When trust wavered in one market, reassurance could be offered from elsewhere. This cross-border flexibility was rare at a time when nationalism narrowed vision and suspicion slowed movement. Moving money during war was an art of restraint. Gold did not travel in caravans announcing their purpose. It moved in smaller quantities, disguised within ordinary commerce, routed through cities where scrutiny was lighter. Sometimes it did not move at all. Paper representations sufficed, backed by mutual understanding within the family network. The goal was not spectacle, but continuity, to ensure that payments arrived when needed and that promises were kept without attracting attention. Information guided these decisions. Letters described conditions along roads, attitudes at ports, and the temper of officials. A border closed unexpectedly, a courier delayed by weather, a sudden spike in demand for currency. Each detail informed timing. The family learned when to accelerate and when to pause. In wartime, stillness could be as powerful as speed. Simple codes appeared in correspondence, not to conceal grand secrets, but to protect routine clarity. Names were shortened, places referenced obliquely, amounts hinted at rather than stated plainly. If a letter were intercepted, it would read as mundane. To the intended recipient, it conveyed everything necessary. This understated approach reduced risk while preserving flow. For governments, working with the Rothschilds meant reliability without publicity. Funds could be raised, transferred, and managed without the delays of public debate. In return, the family earned a reputation as indispensable facilitators. They did not dictate policy, they enabled execution. And in times of war, execution mattered more than theory. Imagine a night scene along a quiet road. A courier pauses, checks a letter, continues. Somewhere else, a clerk notes an entry, closes a ledger, extinguishes a candle. No banners fly, no speeches echo. Yet beneath the surface, resources align, armies remain supplied, and states endure another day. This is the hidden rhythm of wartime finance. Let the story move gently here. Let the idea settle that power can operate without display. In the Napoleonic era, while flags rose and fell,
The Rothschild network learned how to keep trust at rest, even as gold moved silently through the dark.
As the Napoleonic Wars dragged on, one truth became increasingly clear. Battles were decided not only by force, but by timing. Governments could win on the battlefield and still lose momentum if money arrived too late, if supplies stalled, if confidence collapsed at the wrong moment. In this fragile space between victory and failure, information became the most valuable currency of all. And the Rothschild family understood this earlier and more quietly than almost anyone else. Official news in wartime moved slowly. Reports were delayed by distance, censorship, and fear of panic. By the time governments announced outcomes, markets had already reacted in confusion. The Rothschild network operated differently. Their couriers, letters, and trusted contacts provided impressions before confirmations. Not rumors shouted in taverns, but observations gathered carefully and shared within the family. A battle felt won, a general seemed confident, a treasury appeared strained. These nuances arrived days, sometimes weeks before formal declarations. This advantage was never used recklessly. The family did not gamble wildly on single outcomes. Instead, they adjusted posture. Exposure was reduced here, increased there. Liquidity was preserved, commitments were paced. In this way, they navigated uncertainty without appearing prophetic. They were not predicting the future, they were preparing for multiple versions of it. One of the reasons this approach worked was restraint. The Rothschilds resisted the temptation to act loudly on early information. Silence protected credibility. If news proved wrong or incomplete, their positions could be adjusted quietly. This discipline distinguished them from speculators who chased headlines and suffered public losses. The family's method was slower, but far more survivable. As the wars drew toward their conclusion, the cumulative effect of this information advantage became visible. Governments emerged heavily indebted. Financial systems needed reconstruction. Those who had preserved trust during chaos were now essential to recovery. The Rothschilds found themselves not as opportunists, but as fixtures, familiar, reliable, already woven into the financial fabric of Europe. Imagine the final nights of war, cannon fire fading, cities holding their breath. In a quiet room, a letter arrives, reporting not triumph or defeat, but mood, relief, exhaustion, uncertainty. The Rothschilds read, note, and wait. They understand that the end of war does not bring clarity immediately. It brings transition, and transition rewards those who move gently. This closes the chapter of war not with drama, but with calm. The letters slow, the gold rests. Trust, carefully maintained through years of upheaval, remains intact. And as Europe prepares to sleep after a long, violent chapter, the Rothschild network stands ready for the next phase. Not because it sought power, but because it learned how to listen when others could only shout. Let the story settle here. Let the smoke clear slowly. Let the quiet return. In the soft space between conflict and peace, the foundations of enduring financial influence have been laid, almost unnoticed, like ink drying on a page in the dark. There are stories in history that refuse to stay quiet. No matter how many years pass, they resurface again and again, whispered with a sense of mystery, sharpened by suspicion, and polished by repetition. Among financial legends, few are as persistent as the story of Waterloo and the Rothschilds. It is a tale often told in dramatic strokes, a single man, secret knowledge, a market thrown into panic, and a fortune made in silence. Tonight, we will not rush this story. We will sit with it gently, the way one might sit with an old newspaper whose pages have yellowed with time. The legendary version begins on a tense June evening in 1815. Europe waits anxiously for news from the battlefield near Waterloo, where Napoleon's fate is being decided. According to the myth, Nathan Rothschild in London receives word of the British victory before anyone else. He walks calmly into the stock market, his expression unreadable. Then, so the story goes, he begins selling. Observers panic, prices collapse, and at the lowest moment, Nathan quietly buys everything back. By the time the official victory is announced, he controls the market, having turned early information into overwhelming power. It is a story perfectly shaped for rumor, simple, dramatic, personal. It turns the vast complexity of post-war finance into a single decisive gesture. And like many good legends, it feels emotionally satisfying. It offers a villain and a trick. It explains wealth with a moment of cunning rather than decades of structure. And because it feels so vivid, it has endured far longer than most economic facts ever do. But history, when approached slowly, rarely behaves like legend. When we step away from the drama and look carefully at the context, the story begins to soften. The London stock market of 1815 was not a fragile room that could be overturned by a single man's expression. It was cautious, layered, and already shaped by weeks of speculation. News traveled through multiple channels. Prices moved gradually, not in a single collapse. And Nathan Rothschild, while well-connected, was not operating in isolation, nor in secrecy so absolute that no one else could sense the outcome of a war involving half of Europe. What can be said with confidence is simpler and perhaps more interesting. The Rothschild network, built on couriers and correspondence, did receive information efficiently. They were attentive, they were prepared. But preparation does not equal manipulation. It means positioning oneself to respond calmly when confirmation arrives. Historical records suggest that Nathan acted not as a saboteur of the market, but as a stabilizer, continuing to buy government bonds when others hesitated. This was not theatrical deception. It was confidence earned through long familiarity with state finance. So how did the myth grow? Like many financial legends, it expanded in the space between understanding and anxiety. The early 19th century was a time of immense uncertainty. Governments were indebted, markets were nervous, and the Rothschilds were visibly successful. When people seek explanations for power they do not fully grasp, stories fill the gap. Over time, repetition smooths rough edges. Nuance fades. What remains is a parable, easier to remember than reality. As you listen, imagine the night not as a stage for a dramatic trick, but as a moment of collective tension. Candles burning low, traders waiting, papers rustling, no one truly certain what dawn will bring. In that stillness, the seeds of legend are planted. Not because something extraordinary happened, but because many ordinary actions were later stitched together into something extraordinary sounding. Let us rest here for a moment. The market is quiet. The story is not finished. We have only opened the door, gently, to a room filled with echoes. In the next part, we will walk further inside, examining how such myths spread, why they persist, and what they reveal about our relationship with money and power, all without raising our voices above a whisper.
To understand why the Waterloo story grew so large, we need to step away from the battlefield and into the quieter spaces where stories evolve. Myths rarely appear fully formed. They begin as small misunderstandings, half-heard remarks, or attempts to simplify events that feel overwhelming. The early 19th century was filled with such moments. Finance was becoming abstract, global, and difficult to grasp. When people feel excluded from understanding, they often reach for narrative instead. In the weeks following Waterloo, Europe was exhausted. Victory did not bring instant relief. Markets were unstable, governments were indebted, and ordinary citizens struggled to make sense of what peace would actually mean. In this atmosphere, attention turned toward those who seemed to move through uncertainty with confidence. The Rothschilds stood out not because they were loud, but because they were steady. Their calm presence invited interpretation. Calm to an anxious mind can appear suspicious. Early pamphlets and political commentators began to speculate. Some were critical of bankers in general, seeing finance as a shadowy force behind visible power. Others were simply trying to explain how wealth accumulated so quickly in a single family. Over time, these explanations hardened into accusation. If the Rothschilds were wealthy, the reasoning went, they must have known something others did not. If they knew something, perhaps they used it unfairly. Each step in this logic felt plausible to readers who lacked access to records or context. Crucially, many versions of the story emerged decades later, long after the events themselves. Memory had faded, details blurred. Writers repeated earlier claims without verification. What began as speculation became quotation. Quotation became common knowledge, and common knowledge, once established, resists correction. This is how financial legends persist, not because they are true, but because they're useful. They provide a simple explanation for complex systems. Historical research paints a quieter picture. Records show that bond prices did not collapse suddenly on the day Nathan Rothschild appeared at the exchange. Movements were gradual, reflecting ongoing uncertainty rather than panic triggered by one man. There is no evidence of a secret signal causing mass selling. What exists instead are routine transactions consistent with a market adjusting to new information over time. Yet the myth endured, partly because it resonated with deeper fears. Financial power is invisible. It operates through trust, paper, and timing rather than spectacle. This makes it fertile ground for suspicion. When people cannot see how influence works, they imagine it must be hidden deliberately. The Waterloo story became a vessel for that imagination. As you listen, imagine rumors moving the way letters once did, slowly at first, then faster as they were retold. Each retelling simplified the story, sharpened its edges, and removed uncertainty. What remained was a narrative that felt complete, even comforting in its clarity. Someone knew, someone acted, someone benefited. The world felt less random. But history rarely offers such neat closures. Reality is usually quieter, layered, and unsatisfying to those seeking drama. The Rothschild story at Waterloo is less about a single moment and more about how societies process power they do not fully understand. It reveals as much about the storytellers as it does about the family itself. Let this realization settle gently. Myths are not lies told maliciously. They are shortcuts taken by memory. As we prepare to move into the final part of this chapter, we will look not at what the Rothschilds did that night, but at what the legend did afterward, how it shaped public perception, and why calm explanations so often arrive too late.
Long after the guns of Waterloo fell silent, the story continued to march. Not across battlefields, but across conversations, pamphlets, dinner tables, and eventually books. The myth no longer needed evidence to survive. It had become something else entirely, a symbol. In that form, it traveled easily, adapting itself to the fears and questions of each new generation. What began as a misunderstanding hardened into a narrative that felt more real than the careful work of historians. As financial systems grew larger and more abstract in the decades that followed, the need for simple explanations grew with them. Markets were no longer places one could easily see or touch. They became networks of trust, expectation, and belief. In such an environment, the idea that a single family once controlled events offered comfort. It suggested that uncertainty had a face, that complexity could be blamed on intention rather than structure. The Waterloo story fit this need perfectly. Over time, it was retold with increasing certainty. Details were added that had never appeared in early accounts. Motives were assigned retroactively. The quiet patience of banking was reimagined as cunning manipulation. Each retelling pushed the story further from the slow reality of 19th century finance and closer to folklore. And folklore, once formed, is resistant to correction. It does not ask to be proven, it asks to be believed. What is often forgotten in these retellings is how unremarkable the real mechanisms were. No secret signal changed the market in an instant. No single transaction decided the fate of Europe. What existed instead was preparation, scale, and consistency. The Rothschilds did not succeed because of a trick at Waterloo. They succeeded because they had built a network capable of functioning before, during, and after crisis. That is less exciting than a legend, but far more instructive. Historians who revisit the period find a quieter truth. The family's advantage lay in endurance. They remained active when others withdrew. They continued to transact when fear made many freeze. This was not manipulation, it was commitment. It required capital, patience, and trust accumulated over decades. None of these qualities translate well into a dramatic anecdote, so they are often ignored. Yet the myth persists because it speaks to something deeper than history. It reflects discomfort with invisible power. When influence cannot be seen directly, it is imagined. When systems feel overwhelming, stories reduce them to human scale. The Waterloo legend is not just about the Rothschilds. It is about how societies cope with forces that shape lives quietly and relentlessly. As this chapter comes to rest, imagine folding that old newspaper at last. The ink has smudged. The headlines feel less urgent. What remains is context. The realization that wealth, like history itself, rarely turns on a single night. It accumulates through structures, habits, and decisions repeated patiently over time. Let the noise fade. Let the myth soften. What stays with us now is not the thrill of a conspiracy, but the calm understanding that reality is often slower, steadier, and more human than legend allows. And in that understanding, the mind can finally rest. Power is often imagined as something visible, a throne, a crown, a parade of banners and uniforms. But in the 19th century, as Europe slowly rebuilt itself after decades of war, a different form of power took shape.
one that preferred quiet rooms to grand halls, ledgers to speeches, and signatures to swords. This was the world in which the Rothschild banking empire matured, not as an empire of land, but as an empire of agreements. By this point in history, the Rothschild family no longer needed to chase opportunity. Opportunity came to them. Governments emerging from war faced the same problem everywhere. They were exhausted, indebted, and under pressure to rebuild. Roads needed repair. Railways needed funding. Armies had to be downsized without collapse. Diplomacy required resources long before treaties could stabilize borders. Money, once again, became the silent language through which stability was negotiated. The Rothschild banks offered something few others could: scale combined with discretion. They could raise large sums without causing panic. They could distribute risk across borders. They could move capital in ways that did not alarm markets already sensitive to shock. For kings and ministers, this mattered deeply. Public borrowing carried political risk. Private arrangements, handled quietly, allowed governments to function without spectacle. The family's offices reflected this philosophy. There were no gilded thrones, no dramatic architecture meant to impress. Instead, there were long wooden tables, tall windows letting in steady light, and shelves lined with documents. Conversations unfolded slowly. Numbers were checked and rechecked. Decisions were written down carefully. This was not the theater of power. It was the maintenance of it. What made the Rothschilds indispensable was not simply wealth, but reliability over time. They honored commitments even when circumstances changed. They understood that trust, once broken, could not be repaired quickly. In an era when regimes rose and fell, this consistency became rare. The family positioned itself not as a ruler, but as a constant presence across changing governments. Whoever sat on the throne, the financial needs remained. Infrastructure became a natural extension of this role. Railways, canals, and communication networks were not just commercial ventures, they were political arteries. Financing them meant shaping the pace and direction of modernization. Yet, even here, the Rothschild approach remained restrained. Investments were evaluated patiently. Returns were important, but stability mattered more. Projects that connected regions reduced risk by tying economies together. As you imagine this chapter, picture a quiet afternoon in a banking house. Sunlight falls across paper. A pen pauses, then moves again. Outside, the city hums softly, unaware that decisions made in this room will ripple outward for decades. This is the essence of the invisible empire, influence exercised through continuity rather than command. Let the idea settle gently. Power does not always announce itself. Sometimes it sits quietly, keeping systems running while attention drifts elsewhere. In the next part, we will move deeper into this world, exploring how such quiet influence shaped diplomacy and why leaders continued to seek it out even when public opinion grew wary of unseen hands.
As Europe settled into an uneasy peace, diplomacy changed its tone. Treaties still mattered, but behind every agreement lay questions of cost, credit, and timing. Wars had taught governments a hard lesson. Promises meant little without the means to sustain them. In this quieter phase of the 19th century, finance became an essential companion to politics,
and the Rothschilds found themselves positioned at the crossroads where these two worlds met. Ministers and monarchs did not approach the family seeking spectacle or endorsement. They came seeking reassurance. Budgets were fragile. Public confidence could shatter quickly. Raising funds openly risked political backlash, while delaying action risked instability. The Rothschild banks offered a third path: private negotiation conducted with precision and restraint. Loans could be structured to avoid sudden shocks. Payments could be timed to align with revenue. Obligations could be spread across markets rather than concentrated in one vulnerable place. This role required a particular temperament. Loud influence would have been counterproductive. What governments needed was someone who could operate in parallel with official institutions, not in competition with them. The Rothschilds became translators between states and markets, explaining one to the other in a language both could accept. Numbers replaced rhetoric. Schedules replaced declarations. Over time, this predictability became invaluable. Financial diplomacy also depended on neutrality. The family's network crossed borders that politics often hardened. To remain useful, they had to avoid entanglement in ideological extremes. This did not mean indifference, but balance. By maintaining relationships across rival states, the Rothschilds reduced risk for themselves and for their clients. Capital could continue to move even when trust between governments faltered. In practice, this meant countless quiet meetings, long discussions at wooden tables, papers reviewed line by line, terms adjusted incrementally. There were no dramatic breakthroughs, only gradual alignment. These processes rarely made headlines, yet they shaped outcomes just as surely as public speeches did. Infrastructure projects advanced, debts were restructured, diplomatic tensions eased, not because problems vanished, but because they became manageable. Over time, leaders learned that working with the Rothschilds offered continuity. Elections changed cabinets, revolutions altered regimes, but debts endured. By engaging with a family whose horizon extended beyond individual governments, states gained stability. This stability, more than any single loan, defined the invisible empire. It rested on expectation rather than command. Imagine these moments unfolding in the background of history. While crowds gather in squares and debates echo in chambers, elsewhere, a quieter conversation continues. Pens move steadily, pages are turned, agreements are refined. Nothing feels urgent, yet everything matters. This is diplomacy slowed to a human pace, anchored by numbers that speak softly but carry weight. As you listen, allow this image to settle. Influence here is not imposed, it is invited. It does not demand attention, it earns trust. In the next part, we will step back and see how this quiet role, repeated across decades, transformed from a service into a lasting structure, an empire that did not announce itself, yet endured.
By the middle of the 19th century, the shape of the Rothschild banking empire was no longer defined by individual deals, but by habit. What had once been innovation settled into routine. Loans were negotiated calmly. Investments were evaluated methodically. Relationships were maintained patiently. This was how the invisible empire sustained itself, not through dramatic expansion, but through repetition refined over time. Unlike political power, which rises and falls with visibility, financial influence thrives on continuity. The Rothschilds understood that attention is volatile.
while systems endure. They allowed others to occupy the spotlight while they remained in the background, adjusting quietly as circumstances shifted. This approach insulated them from the turbulence that often accompanies fame. When public opinion turned suspicious of wealth, their work remained largely unchanged, carried out behind familiar doors by familiar hands. The structure of the family reinforced this steadiness. Responsibilities were divided. Oversight was shared. No single branch dominated the others. This internal balance prevented collapse when external pressures mounted. It also discouraged reckless ambition. Success was measured not by dominance, but by resilience. The question was never how much could be gained quickly, but how stability could be preserved over generations. As industrialization accelerated, the scope of finance expanded. New industries demanded capital. New technologies reshaped economies. Yet the Rothschild approach remained consistent. They invested where long-term demand aligned with public need. Railways, utilities, and communication networks were favored not because they were fashionable, but because they anchored societies. These choices deepened the family's integration into national infrastructures, further embedding their influence without requiring public acknowledgement. What emerges from this period is not the image of an all-powerful family directing events, but of a network that learned how to endure change without being consumed by it. The invisible empire did not command, it adapted. It did not announce its presence, it maintained relevance. This distinction matters because it explains why the family persisted when many others faded. Imagine a city at dusk, offices closing, streets growing quiet. Inside a bank, a ledger is balanced, not for spectacle, but for accuracy. The work ends not with applause, but with closure. This is how influence survived the century, not as drama, but as routine performed well. As we close this chapter, allow the concept of the invisible empire to soften. It was never a shadowy force controlling the world. It was a structure built on trust, timing, and restraint. Its power lay not in secrecy, but in predictability. And predictability, when applied patiently, can shape history more profoundly than any sudden act. Let the noise fall away. What remains is a calm realization. The most enduring forms of power rarely demand to be seen. They persist quietly, doing their work while the world looks elsewhere. In that quiet, systems hold, and in that holding, history moves forward almost unnoticed.
There is a quiet pattern that repeats itself throughout history. When wealth becomes too vast to be easily understood, it begins to attract stories. When a family becomes both powerful and private, imagination fills the space left by silence. Over time, that imagination hardens into rumor, and rumor becomes belief. The Rothschilds did not escape this pattern. In many ways, they embodied it. As the 19th century gave way to the 20th, the family's name had grown larger than any single bank, city, or individual. It was no longer just a surname. It became shorthand for money, for influence, for something unseen. And once a name reaches that stage, it stops belonging fully to the people who carry it. It becomes public property, reshaped by fear, resentment, and fascination. The myths followed a familiar shape. Some claimed the Rothschilds controlled governments from behind curtains. Others imagined secret meetings where wars were decided by pen strokes rather than soldiers. In these stories, the family became less human and more symbolic,
a stand-in for the anxiety people felt toward financial systems they could not touch or fully understand. The quieter the family remained, the louder these stories grew. Yet when we slow down and look carefully, the distance between myth and reality becomes clear. The Rothschilds were influential, but not omnipotent. They navigated markets, but they did not command them. They advised governments, but they did not rule them. Like all financiers, they operated within constraints: political backlash, economic cycles, internal disagreements, and simple human error. What is often missing from conspiracy theories is scale. Modern financial systems are too complex to be controlled by any single family. Even at their height, the Rothschilds competed with other banks, faced failed investments, and endured losses. Some ventures succeeded quietly, others faded without comment. This unevenness is rarely remembered because myths prefer absolutes. The human cost of myth-making was real. Being perceived as all-powerful invites hostility. Suspicion followed the family across borders. Anti-Semitic narratives folded the Rothschild name into much older prejudices, turning financial success into moral accusation. Wealth became framed not as the result of structure and timing, but as evidence of manipulation. These stories said more about society's fears than about the family itself. Inside the family, life continued with ordinary tensions. Brothers disagreed. Generations clashed on strategy. Some heirs preferred caution, others ambition. There were moments of pride and moments of exhaustion. These details rarely make it into legend, yet they define reality. A dynasty is not a single will. It is a collection of people trying, often imperfectly, to preserve something they inherited rather than created. As you listen, imagine the contrast. Outside, voices speculate, accuse, and exaggerate. Inside, letters discuss budgets, repairs, education, and legacy. The myth imagines omniscience. The reality manages uncertainty. This gap between perception and truth is where the curse of wealth takes hold. The richer and quieter a family becomes, the less room there is for nuance. Let this part of the story settle gently. Myths do not arise because people are foolish. They arise because complexity is tiring, and stories are easier to carry. In the next part, we will move even closer, looking at how the Rothschilds themselves lived with this burden, how they adapted, withdrew, and sometimes reshaped their own identity under the weight of being endlessly imagined.
So, for the Rothschilds, the myths never truly ended. They evolved, shifted shape, and resurfaced with each new generation. What changed was how the family learned to live with them. Over time, silence became less a strategy and more a form of self-preservation. Public explanations rarely corrected rumor. Engagement often amplified it. So the family retreated further into private life, allowing stories to circulate without response. This withdrawal carried a cost. When a name becomes larger than the people behind it, individuality fades. Children inherit not just wealth, but expectation. Every action is read symbolically. Every success feeds the myth. Every failure is used to confirm it. The family became careful, not because they were hiding something extraordinary, but because ordinary mistakes felt unforgivable when magnified by reputation. Contrary to popular imagination, wealth did not insulate them from uncertainty. Markets changed, political climates shifted, laws evolved. Some branches of the family adapted more successfully than others. Certain banks closed,
Investments were restructured or abandoned. These moments rarely enter popular narratives because they disrupt the image of uninterrupted control. Yet they reveal something more truthful. Endurance is uneven, even for the wealthy. Within the family, debates about identity grew more prominent. Should they remain financiers or diversify into culture, science, and philanthropy? Should they be visible or continue the tradition of discretion? Different answers emerged in different places. Some members chose public roles, supporting art, education, and medicine. Others preferred anonymity, believing that influence exercised quietly was safer and more ethical. This divergence underscores an important truth. The Rothschilds were never a single mind. They were a lineage navigating time. The myth imagines coordination without friction. Reality is more fragile. Relationships strain, values shift, priorities conflict. What held the family together was not secrecy, but a shared understanding of risk, financial, social, and personal. As the 20th century unfolded, the world grew louder. Media accelerated, narratives simplified. The gap between myth and reality widened further. The Rothschild name continued to appear in explanations for events far beyond their reach. This persistence says less about the family than about society's need for symbols. Complex systems invite simplified villains and heroes. Wealthy families become screens onto which fears are projected. Listening now, in the quiet of this story, we can step away from those projections. We can see the family not as architects of destiny, but participants in it, shaped by forces they did not control as much as by choices they made. Their story is less about domination and more about adaptation, less about conspiracy and more about continuity. As this chapter closes, allow the idea of truth versus myth to settle gently. Truth is rarely dramatic. It is layered, incomplete, and sometimes unsatisfying. Myth is smooth, memorable, and comforting in its certainty. But it is truth that helps us rest, because it does not demand vigilance. It simply exists. In the end, the greatest burden of extraordinary wealth may not be power, but perception. To be endlessly imagined is to be endlessly misunderstood. The Rothschilds lived within that misunderstanding for generations, carrying it quietly, much like the fortunes they managed, carefully, cautiously, and always aware that silence can be both shield and weight.
If you listen to the name Rothschild today, it no longer carries the same singular weight it once did. The world has changed. Finance has multiplied. Power has fragmented. There is no longer one family, one bank, or one network standing unmistakably above all others. And yet, this does not mean the story ended. It means the river widened. In the modern financial landscape, wealth moves faster, spreads thinner, and hides more easily than it ever did in the 19th century. Global markets operate around the clock. Corporations span continents. Investment funds manage sums that dwarf the fortunes of old dynasties. In this world, the Rothschilds are still wealthy, still influential in select spheres, but no longer untouchable, no longer central. They are participants, not pillars. This shift is not a failure. It is a consequence of the very systems they helped shape. The banking principles that once concentrated power now distribute it. Information flows instantly rather than by courier. Trust is institutionalized through regulation rather than personal reputation alone. Where once a family network provided stability, now layers of institutions perform that role collectively. To ask what happened to the Rothschilds is therefore to misunderstand the arc of history.
Nothing dramatic happened, no collapse, no disappearance. Instead, there was absorption. The methods they pioneered, international coordination, long-term lending, risk diversification, discreet negotiation, became normal. When everyone uses the same tools, the inventor no longer stands out. Today, different branches of the family occupy different paths. Some remain connected to finance, others focus on philanthropy, science, art, and conservation. Their names appear quietly on foundations, museums, and research projects. This diversification reflects a broader truth. In a world of distributed power, legacy survives through influence rather than control. The idea of invincibility fades with modernity. No family, no institution, no system is beyond disruption. Markets correct, technologies shift, public trust rises and falls. The Rothschilds, like all historical actors, now move within these currents rather than directing them. Their wealth is real but bounded. Their influence is present but contextual. Yet beneath this surface, their imprint remains. Modern banking still rests on principles they refined: the importance of credibility, the value of networks, the quiet power of coordination. These ideas persist not as monuments, but as habits embedded in how money moves, invisible but enduring. As you listen, imagine the river from the beginning of this story, a narrow stream in a cramped alley, carefully guided, gradually widening as it moves through cities, countries, centuries. Eventually, it becomes part of a vast system of waterways, no longer distinguishable as a single source, but its water is still there, flowing alongside countless others. This is how legacy works at its deepest level, not as domination, but as diffusion, not as permanence, but as integration. In the next and final part, we will gently close this journey, returning to the human scale, to the quiet truth that history is shaped not only by those who rule loudly, but by those who build patiently and then allow their work to dissolve into the world.
As this story comes to rest, it helps to return to where it began, not to a palace or a boardroom, but to a narrow alley in Frankfurt, dimly lit, damp, and easily forgotten. A place where history did not announce itself, where a family worked quietly, one transaction at a time, without knowing how far their efforts would travel. That beginning matters because it reminds us that no legacy starts as a monument. It starts as repetition, as patience, as attention paid when no one is watching. Today, the Rothschilds no longer stand alone at the summit of global finance. Their name no longer defines an era, and yet, in many ways, their story feels complete precisely because of that. They became part of something larger than themselves. The systems they helped refine now operate independently of any single family. Banking no longer depends on dynasties, but on frameworks. Trust is encoded into institutions rather than personal letters. Information moves instantly, not by horse or ship. The world they shaped outgrew them. There is a quiet dignity in that outcome. To build something that eventually no longer needs you is a rare achievement. It means the work was solid enough to endure without constant reinforcement. It means influence dissolved into structure. The Rothschild legacy is not a throne left empty. It is a foundation still carrying weight. When people ask where the family is now, the most honest answer is simple. They are everywhere and nowhere.
Their presence is felt in practices rather than headlines, in assumptions rather than declarations. Modern banking speaks their language without naming them. The idea that money flows across borders through trust, coordination, and restraint did not vanish. It became normal. As you lie listening, allow your breathing to slow. Imagine the centuries compressing gently, like pages closing one by one. The noise of markets fades, the arguments quiet. What remains is a pattern: small beginnings, steady growth, gradual diffusion, and finally integration into the background of daily life. This pattern repeats across history, far beyond this one family. The Rothschilds' story does not end with dominance or downfall. It ends with absorption, with the understanding that the greatest changes are not always visible when they happen. They reveal themselves later, in how the world works without remembering why. Let this realization soften you. History does not rush. It accumulates, it settles, and eventually it rests, just as this story does now. You do not need to remember every detail. You do not need to judge. Simply allow the arc to exist, complete and quiet. As the night deepens, imagine that first small room again, the wooden table, the careful hands, the silence. From that silence came movement, and from movement came systems, and from systems came the world you know. Nothing dramatic, nothing sudden, just time doing what time always does. And now, with the story gently closed, you can let your thoughts drift. History will continue without your attention. The legacy will remain without being named, and you can rest, knowing that even the largest forces often begin and end in stillness.